This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we have as our guest tonight not a politician, but a well-known Alabama businessman named Richard Scrushy, who has got some books out. We're going to talk about those books, and he's been around politics, but he never was a politician like me. He's been around politics. Richard, good to have you on the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Richard Scrushy now lives in Houston, Texas, with his wonderful wife, Leslie, and Leslie was a junior miss from Jacksonville, Florida, and went to Troy. She was a distinguished young junior miss, and Troy University with Jack Hawkins made an issue to recruit junior misses to Troy University, and she was a Troy University student. And you and Leslie have been married how many years now?
We're 24 years.
24 years.
Mm-hmm.
Richard, let's get down to your books, but I also want to tell folks, and this may intertwine with your books, about your whole career and everything. A lot's been said and all done about you growing up in Selma, and tell folks, I mean, just take your time and tell folks who Richard Scrucci is, where you were born in Selma and grew up there, and what schools you went to. You also had a penchant for not just business, but music, too.
Did a little music.
Yeah, so talk about your growing up. Were you born in Selma?
Well, now, this is a story, because this always messes with everybody's mind, okay? My mother and her family were in Sampson, down in Wiregrass.
Yeah, Wiregrass.
Okay, my mother and father were visiting my grandmother when she went into labor. Well, there's no hospital was near back in those days.
In Sampson?
That was 1952, and so the nearest doctor was over in Florella.
Yeah.
So they drove to Florella, and I was delivered in a doctor's office.
In
my
Florella,
mother, in Florella,
in the Covington County, actually.
Covington County, and so my birth certificate says Florella, Alabama, Covington. So I guess I was on that side of the line.
But now, were you folks from Selma just happened to be visiting?
My folks were visiting. They were living in Selma, so you know, it was a natural for me to get into the healthcare business and try to build something that was non-hospital.
Yeah, right.
Because I was born in a doctor's office. But yeah, Florella, Alabama, and then of course my parents were in Selma. I grew up in Selma in the 50s. And so when I wrote the book, you know, because people want to always go back to where you're from, so I just went ahead and just laid it out from Selma to Wall Street. Because I went all the way to Wall Street. I spent 20 years. Dealing with Wall Street companies. I built 3 New York Stock Exchange companies. All of them were multi-billion-dollar companies. 2 of them were Fortune 500 companies. And so I tell the story about some of that in the book. I don't tell everything, but I do tell a lot of very interesting stories. And it also tells about some of the, I climbed the mountain. I went through the valley. I went through the fire. And I had to have a lot of faith to be able to survive that. And that's what this book is about. But I also talk about people in the book who had went through trials where there was injustice, where they were innocent and they were prosecuted. I was innocent, I was prosecuted, and I was penalized for something I didn't do. And by the way, I'll tell you a little bit about that, but some things are going to be coming out here in the relative near future that will show that Don Sigelman and I were 2 guys who should never have been prosecuted. Right. We didn't do anything wrong. We're totally innocent. And that's thanks to Tommy Gallion, he has uncovered in writing his book some of the corruption that was in our trial that put Sigelman and I through what we went through.
I've had Tommy on the show talk about that.
It's coming out.
Sitting right with you. We hit his first book, though. He did when he had to, and that was one of the most popular shows I've ever had.
Yep.
Because a lot of my viewership here in this show is in the River region. Now it goes statewide, but it's a lot of. But Gallion, he was the most colorful guest that we ever had here on the show. I got to have Gallion back on.
Hell, you need to have us both, because he has uncovered some things that were fascinating. And he called me and said, you need to come see me. And I went and sat down with him, and I literally cried when he started showing me things, how things were done wrong to Don Sigelman and I. I was a Republican, and I never supported Don.
A lot of that stuff stemmed from Bob Riley, didn't it?
Well, here I am, a Republican, supported all these Republicans. I'm a business guy. I like the conservative issues. I'm very much for low taxes. I'm very much for, education. I'm very much for people being the best they can be and doing the best they can do, right? And I believe that we're better off with the Republican leadership. Well, and here I was attacked by Republicans. what in the world? How in the world that happened? You know, I supported George Bush, and you know, I'm attacked by his prosecutors. I'm attacked by, and so yeah, a lot of it was wrong. It was very, very wrong, and I feel like I was pulled into that to keep Don Sigelman from being reelected governor, because a lot of people believe that Don Sigelman had the ability to run for president. And when we look at the president we have today, we know good and doggone well that Don Sigelman is much better than what we got, I believe.
Well, Sigelman actually had the exact same pedigree as Bill Clinton.
Yep.
If you looked at their profile, it was almost identical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had the, matter of fact, if someone looked at them at that era, they said it'll be Bill Clinton or Don Sigelman, one or other be president.
I think so, and I really believe that that he had the ability to do it. He knew how to speak to people. He knew the issues, and he would have been able to say all the right things. So I think that Don had a shot at it, and I think that the attack bringing me in, because I had been through a high-profile trial up in Birmingham, which I won. A lot of people don't realize that I won that trial, but I think that the negativity and the press and all the things kind of worked to their advantage in the prosecution of Don.
Richard, go back further. Some of our viewers may not know what you're talking about that. You assume they know because there's been some time past, but start back when you were growing up a boy in Selma and how you started HealthSouth and your career and everything, because believe it or not, a lot of people may not know what HealthSouth is. I mean, I know what the fact that there was a trial at all. So where'd you go to college, and did you go to college, and that start back there and tell how the start of HealthSouth and the demise of that trial you're talking about, if you would.
Well, you know, we grew up in a very simple family down in Selma in just a small home, and my parents were working parents. My dad he worked for NCR, National Cash Register. My mother was a nurse. They always worked, always at work, you know, and
now you had some siblings, didn't you?
I did. I had a brother and a sister, and you know, I had a younger brother and an older sister. But my mother was in the healthcare business, and when I, you know, got out of high school and I was going to college, there in Selma at George Wallace. Thank God for George Wallace making those colleges available to so many people, because it was a great start for me. So I started right there in Selma going to college, and my mother was able to get me a job working at the hospital because she had been there for many years in Selma. So that got me started.
What's the name of the hospital in Selma?
It was it was the Baptist. Then it became the Selma Medical Center.
So you got to start doing work in the hospital. Were you still in high school?
At a young age. I was out of high school. I was in my first year of college. And so I went to work there, and then after about a year or so, I moved to Birmingham because I was able to go to UAB, and I went to UAB. Actually, I did a year at Jefferson State Junior College. Then I went over got my associate's degree, and then I went to UAB and finished up there. And I graduated as a respiratory therapist, became a registered respiratory therapist. But I went to Birmingham to go to school, but also they paid a lot more money in Birmingham for a therapist. So I got a good job up there.
As soon as you got out of school, you became respiratory
Well,
therapist.
I got hired. I graduated tops in my class, and they hired me as a teacher. And I taught in
UAB?
At UAB. I became an instructor there. I taught in the respiratory therapy program for about 2.5 years, okay? And then I ended up being the director of the program. And while I was there, I was being recruited by various hospitals to go to work for the hospitals. And I ended up, and make a long story short, I ended up working for a national hospital chain based out of Houston, Texas, and it was called LifeMark Corporation. They hired me there as a regional manager to go up to St. Louis and oversee.
And so you had to move to St. Louis.
I moved to St. Louis. But before I went to St. Louis, I was hired to go down and help get the school started down at George Wallace Community College in Dothan. And I went down and got the respiratory therapy program down there accredited, and went through that accreditation process. And then I was hired away from there, and I went to LifeMark out in Houston. Actually, they moved me to St. Louis. I worked there a year. One night, I got a call, and it was the president of the company. He says, "I'm flying up to meet with you. I get a reservation at a restaurant. I want to talk to you." And I thought he's going to fire me or something. Have I done something wrong? And he flew up there.
How long have you been in St. Louis?
I'd been there a year. And he came in, we had dinner, and he says, "I want you to move to Houston. I'm going to make you president of the division." And I said, "What?" I said, "I've only been here a year. I'm only 26, 27 years old, and a lot of guys been here a long time." He said, "Yeah, but you're the best guy I got, and I want you to come to Houston." And I said, "When?" He said, "Immediately." So we packed up. I went down to Houston, and I I took over that division, and then that was a $1 billion company, New York Stock Exchange company, and I was there for 5 years. After a year or so, they gave me another division. I took over all the pharmacy operations. They had a network of pharmacies throughout the country. Took over all their physical therapy operations, all their cardiopulmonary respiratory operations. And then I got moved into a section of the company where we built and bought hospitals. And so I ended up building and buying hospitals for LifeMark. Well, by then I had a master's and a doctorate degree in healthcare. I had climbed all the way up the ladder in 5 years. And so
were you 5 years in Houston then with LifeMark?
Yep, and then I got a call.
You about 30 by this time, probably.
I'm about 30 years old, and I'm out working on buying a hospital. I was in Atlanta airport getting ready to get on a plane, and the controller of the company called me. He said, "You're a rich man." And I said, "What?" He said, "We just sold the company, and all that stock you had in the company is worth, you're worth something now." And so all the way home, he said, "Get on a plane and come on back, and I'll tell you about it." So
Houston, you go back to Houston.
And I'm 30 years old, and here I hit the jackpot with this company because I had worked very, very hard, and they were giving me stock options in the company, and I was, exercising those.
You've been up there since about 5 years.
For 5 years. So I took that money when they sold the company. I elected not to go with them, and I wanted to come back home because I had my parents were getting old.
You want to go to Birmingham?
I moved back to Birmingham. So I came back to Birmingham, and I took that money that I made, and I started HealthSouth with it.
That's when you started HealthSouth?
I started HealthSouth with my own money.
HealthSouth was really basically outpatient.
It started out as an outpatient business, and we built over a period of time over 2,000 outpatient centers. So we were, my goal was to be in all 50 states. I made that. We built it into all 50 states. But during the process, we then found out that we had talent and there was opportunity to build and operate rehabilitation hospitals. So we did that. We added surgery centers. So we began to look at it and we said, well, how does this all really work? What is the continuum? We said, well, patient has to have surgery on his knee, hip, back, whatever. They go into a rehab hospital. Now, before they have the surgery, they have to have an MRI. So we started building MRI centers to get diagnostic centers. Then they would get surgery. Then they would go into rehab, and then they would go to outpatient rehab.
You really were competing against
hospitals. I built the whole continuum because what we found out back in that day, where hospitals were costing several thousand a day, we were able to treat them in our rehab hospital for $700 a day, $800 a day. And we were able to save a lot of money.
And insurance paid either way.
Insurance paid that, and they loved it. So, and then we were able to move them quickly out of the inpatient into an outpatient setting and get them home. And so we realized that we were treating sports injuries, we were treating spinal injuries, we were treating head injuries, we were treating all kinds of orthopedic injuries, stroke patients, all kinds of issues. And we began to build the sports medicine side of it, the stroke side of it, the head injury side of it, the spinal injury side. So we became experts, if you will, in all of those areas, and those were areas where we created programs that would move the patient off the healthcare dollar as quick as could and get athletes back to play and get kids back in school, get people back on the job. And a lot of insurance companies went with us because we were able to reduce the number of times that you would have to go in and get treated, physical therapy or whatever. We were able to move people through the system quickly and get them off the healthcare dollar. Next thing you know, we're signing contracts with General Motors and Chrysler and the Postal Service and Delta Airlines and corporations all over America, and we're helping them reduce their healthcare costs.
So during your 30s, you were building HealthSouth.
We were building it. I mean, we were building it.
It started off in Birmingham.
No, I was there 20 years.
So from age 30 to 50, you built and ran HealthSouth.
Day to day.
That was a day-to-day operation.
Every day.
And it was on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yep.
When did y'all go public in the New York Stock Exchange?
Well, we went public in September of 1986, and then after about 2 or 3 years, we were big enough to qualify to go on the New York Stock Exchange, and when we went on the big board. Sure did. Now, while I was there,
what was the symbol?
It was HRC. HRC, yeah. And then we ended up.
How many Birmingham companies were on the New York Stock Exchange? There were
think
several banks back then.
Well, it was just us, the banks, and I think that was it. There might have been one other company, but it was primarily.
How many employees do you have in your prime?
At one time, I had 80,000 people working for the company.
How many in Alabama, you think?
Well, we had 50 facilities in Alabama. We had.
But the corporate headquarters was there too.
Yeah, we had 50 facilities here. We had, believe it or not, I had 64 locations in Chicago. I had 54 in San Diego. I had over 240 in all of California.
Were you instrumental in starting those other states, or did you have somebody else
We did it all. Yeah, we did it all there out of Birmingham. Yeah, all of the development people. I had the best development people. I had the best operations people. We had dynamite folks, good, solid people that worked hard and earned what they made. And then over a period of time, we had regional people. I had people in California, had people in New York City. I had people in Florida, Miami, everywhere. You know, we had a tremendous team of people.
How many people worked at the corporate headquarters at HealthSouth?
Over 1,000.
Now, were y'all out there on 280?
We were on 280. Yeah, we bought a piece of property out there.
Is that where Grandview Hospital is now?
Yep.
The same place
Grandview
is?
Yep.
And you started, tell us the story of that hospital. It's now become a very prominent hospital in Birmingham.
Doing several billion a year. I mean, well, you got to understand too, when I left HealthSouth and the new guy came in, he said it was a boondoggle, that it was, and they sold, you're not going to believe this, but I just read in a legal document the other day that he sold that hospital for $1.5 million. That hospital is worth over $1 billion today.
That Grandview.
I heard it's doing $2 to $3 billion in revenue. I don't know, but it runs full. Now doctors call me from there all the time. They say it's one of its most fantastic surgical suite, and I was involved in the design of it and the whole hospital. It's probably one of the most successful hospitals in the Southeast.
It's grown. Everybody you talk to says if they're from Brundage or Roanoke, wherever, I say, I got to go to Birmingham to the doctor. I assume they go into UAB. They go into Grandview.
Let me tell you something.
When
I went through that civil trial, that guy testified that that hospital was of no value.
That location.
Now let me ask you this:
you knew that's where a hospital.
Oh my gosh, it's even unbelievable. You know why it was such a great place? If you had to go all the way to Shelby County, and it was in traffic in 280,
right?
You either go to Shelby County or you got to go downtown to St. Vincent's or either to Brookwood. You couldn't get there.
I know.
It was the #1 place to be. It was the best place in all of Alabama to build a hospital.
Both my daughters live in Birmingham, and my younger daughter has 2 little boys. Both of them are born there.
Is that right?
Yeah, most people are now delivering their children at Grandview.
Isn't that fantastic?
Become the biggest obstetrical.
And isn't it beautiful when you come down that hill and look at it? You know, Monza Horani with Medistar was involved with me on designing that hospital. He's based out of Houston, Texas. He built a lot of our projects, but he was a genius on the way that he did the exterior, the windows, you know, because they cool in the summer and they heat in the winter. There's some technology in that hospital. Of course, we were building it as the first digital hospital. You know, I remember that. I had Larry Ellison from Oracle down here. I had all these companies coming in to help us build this. This is before we had all this digital technology, and we were going to make it fully digital. And today, now hospitals are mostly fully digital, but that's where it's going. But we were way ahead of the curve, back in those days.
It was the hospital part of the HealthSouth business. It was going to be one of the.
Well, you know, we had the HealthSouth facility downtown. And you remember we had Dr. Jim Andrews practicing down there.
Was he on board with HealthSouth?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And he was doing, you know, we built the surgical.
Was he only doing HealthSouth stuff? He doing other stuff too, wasn't he?
No, he was only HealthSouth.
Okay.
Well, and then he was, you know, we designed that new hospital so that he could do these. We built rooms on the top floor for his athletes to come in and stay. And we built the surgery suites based on the way he wanted to design them, and they're fantastic. And I've had doctors call me while they're in that surgery suite, and I'm out in Houston. They have my number because I've known them for years. They call me and say, I'm in that surgical suite, and Richard, it's fantastic. You know, I'm really honored to be able to be here. Had a lot of patients call me. I've had people that work there call me and say, you know, I'm working at the hospital you designed and built. And, you know, it was the best hospital and best location. There's no doubt about it.
No question. You can't help but think that it prospered because just the 280 people. If just 280 people went there rather than downtown to UAB or St. Vincent or something.
What a location,
I mean, really.
What a location.
Now, y'all's corporate headquarters wasn't out there, just the
No, corporate headquarters. I built the corporate headquarters.
Was next door to it, wasn't it?
Right next door to it.
I remember going to events there at the HealthSouth.
So, well, yeah, it was the biggest conference center in the state. Yeah.
I used to go to all the events were held there at the HealthSouth.
Exactly. And Steve, we were going to build a 5-star hotel next to it.
That'd been the ideal thing.
And Jim Wilson, to tell you, I was talking to him about joint venturing it with us.
That would have been the ideal location.
And I was going to connect it to the conference center, and you would have had a brand new conference center.
Oh yeah, right there. Now every conference would have gone there.
Medical conventions, everything right there.
Yeah.
With the hospital, there's so many things that we could have done, but unfortunately we didn't get to finish all that. We actually had a model of it.
Well, remind me of the demise of HealthSouth now.
Well, it's HealthSouth doing great. They changed the name. It's Encompass, but I mean, it's still a multi-billion-dollar
So
company.
HealthSouth, that is Encompass now.
Yeah.
Where are their corporate headquarters?
They moved out of that building, which, moved, and I guess there's too many, my ghosts were running around over there, I guess, and they moved it to another location. I've never been to their new location, but they did move out of there. But Encompass, it was,
Where's their corporate headquarters?
I think it's over there.
In Birmingham?
Yeah.
It's in Birmingham?
Yeah, it's in Birmingham. I think it's over there around that Daniel building.
They bought Alacare Home Health.
Yeah, they bought a lot of
recently.
home health care. I never got into the home health care business because it was a lot of Medicare, and it brought the margins of the company down a little bit. So I stayed away from that. I tried to build it up on the other side. That's why I was building the medical centers. But it's a good company. It had strong bones. It had a great foundation.
So now what was HealthSouth is Encompass.
And they own all the same hospitals, except for the one that was probably the most important one, and they sold it for a little or nothing. But it was a great hospital. They should have kept it. But they have all those hospitals that I built and bought all over the country. They still have them all.
Well, tell my viewers, if you would, about your book. Does your book go into all this?
Yeah.
The Demise of HealthSouth and everything?
This book, again, I named it "It Should Not Happen in America" because it talks about things that should never have happened in America, like the trial that Don Sigelman and I went through, and the corruption. We had a judge that was thrown off the bench. We had prosecutors that were overzealous, and they did some things that they shouldn't have done. And we had a jury that was, was dishonest. And we have emails. We have all kind of things. It was held here in Montgomery. So we had a problem with the judge, the jury, and some of the stuff the prosecutors did. There were a lot of things that went on. So we call it "Should Not Happen in America." Now, in this book, I do give an account of a lot of other individuals that also went through similar things, and
that's good.
Talk about that. And then I put it.
Some of them you use in there?
Well, I really don't. I'm gonna let them read this, but it's similar. It's where people were prosecuted and sent off to prison and later found innocent. Where they had corruption either in the prosecutorial side, judges, or somewhere in the system. But I also called it a journey of fire and faith because I knew that I would get through it, even though I went through a lot of difficulties. My family went through a lot, Leslie, my kids. It was almost torturous what they put us through, and it was torturous. It wasn't almost. So I talked a little bit about growing up in the 50s and what it was like. I was there when they marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Yeah, I was there. Yeah,
Selma, that's right.
Yeah. I remember.
So
George,
it says in the book.
It's in the book. George Wallace said, "Don't go down there." My daddy said, "We're going." So we were there. But there's a lot of great stories in the book.
So you got the Selma March in there. You saw it from
I saw it.
in Selma and everything.
Standing on the corner of Broad and Water Avenue.
Here we are at Rosa Parks building there.
Right there.
You and I are the same age. We saw all that stuff.
We did. We grew up in it, didn't we?
I went to segregated schools until my senior year in high school in Troy.
I did too.
I grew up in Troy, and they integrated Troy schools when everybody else did about my junior or senior year. So we saw all that stuff happen. All that turbulent 60s and everything.
We grew up in it.
And we're sitting here in the Rosa Parks building downtown Montgomery right now.
Isn't that amazing? And we knew a lot of things that were wrong that were going on. We were raised in a situation that, you're influenced by the people all around you. But, I think that I thank God that I was able to grow up in that era. I really do, because we didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones. Nobody bothered you. We didn't have we had a station in Selma. We had Channel 12 in Montgomery. That's all we had.
Didn't lock your doors at night?
Didn't lock your doors. Didn't worry about locking. You didn't have to lock your car. We grew up in a great time, and I wouldn't take nothing for it. I had a great mom and daddy. I had great brother and sister. We had a great time. We had a simple life. We didn't even have air conditioning. We had black and white television. And later, when I got older, we got air conditioning and we got a color TV.
It wasn't even black and white.
No, wasn't nothing but black and white.
My first television was black and white.
Had dial phone, rotary phones, and
in Troy, I grew up in Troy. I'm so old. I remember that we had operators that we'd call up and say, 1, 2, what's Steve? And
party line.
Wasn't party line. They knew your number. Say, Steve, who you want to call? I said, I'm going to call my grandmama. You
Isn't that something?
It's wrong. Well, her number's 1283. The operator will be on the phone. You know.
She knew it, yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, we used to cut grass to make pocket change.
I did too. That's good money in there.
Picked up pecans, raked leaves, did whatever, you know, whatever we had to do. And it was a great life.
We're on a Troy show, you know, talking about being here at Troy, and he won't mind something. He was proud of it. The most frugal man I ever knew was President of Troy State when I was growing up, named Ralph Adams. When I first went to legislature, Ralph was president. He was so miserly, he would go out and pick the pecans up in front of the president's office.
Is that right? Oh, my gosh.
I think it was the president out there. He was a tight fella. You know, did you
tight.
ever know Ralph?
No, I know of him.
Of the stories about him?
Yeah, no, Leslie was there, I guess, when he was there. Yeah.
His son Sam's probably got half the nickels that old Ralph left him. You know?
Is that right?
Anyway, that's a great. You know, HealthSouth is a great Alabama business story.
It was one. It really was. And then we built Med Partners, which became Caremark.
Okay.
And then I ended up over there running that company as CEO and chairman there for a while, and then I brought somebody else in to take it over. But they eventually, it was about a $9 billion company when I was there. And it was a you know, a Fortune 500 company, but it ended up selling that company for around $27 billion.
Good Lord.
And it was founded right here. Larry House and I, you know, we put the company together, raised the money, and built it.
Wasn't he from Selma too?
Huh? No, Larry's wife was from Selma.
Okay.
Linda Harrison.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of got together, but Larry and I, we worked a lot together. And then there was a company we started called Capstone Capital. And we built that company. Now, in this other book that I wrote a book called When Building a $1 Billion Company. Here are a few things you might want to think about. So I felt like, well, I built $3 billion companies. I guess I was a legitimate, you know, author to be able to write a book about if you want to build one. Now, I didn't write this on how to build one. This is written as if it was me telling you a few things you might want to think about. Like if I was talking to a young man or a young woman that wanted to build a $1 billion company, and I just tell them, these are things you might want to think about if you're going to go build a company. And I give them a lot of insight of things that I learned over a 20-year period of building a $1 billion company.
Well, they probably ought to use it as a textbook in some business schools.
Well, and I have spoken at a lot of business schools and taken this book, and when I speak, I take it chapter by chapter and kind of break it down of the things. You know, I had dinner with a lot of people don't realize I had dinner with Warren Buffett twice.
Is that right?
I sure did. 2 times up in Washington. I was with Senator Kerry and Bob Kerry and Senator Patrick Moynihan prior to his death. And I was there with Warren Buffett. We had dinner at Patrick Moynihan's condominium overlooking the Washington Monument.
Did Buffett buy a HealthSouth stock?
I don't know. I don't know. But I asked him a stupid question. I talk about it in the book, and about the question that I asked Warren Buffett. And I think there's a picture in here of me and Warren Buffett. But anyways, I asked him, I said, why Coca-Cola and not Pepsi? And he looked at me and he says, you really don't know? And he says, Coca-Cola's #1. I only buy #1, Richard. And I felt like a complete fool, you know. But he was a real nice guy. It was great. But this is a great book. You can get this on Amazon. This book, you know, self-published. But it's on Amazon. You can get it and you can go to my website. But this book here, New South Books, I sent it out to some publishers, and next thing I know, I've got New South Books. You know, they wanted the book. This book is in a trust, belongs to my children, and so anybody that buys it, you're helping my kids.
Well, good.
And they're, you know, going to college age and trying to do well. They own the book. I gave the book to them prior to it being published.
Well, good.
So.
Richard, our time's up. I hate to tell you, that goes by in a hurry, doesn't it?
It does. But
folks, our guest tonight's been Richard Scrushy. Y'all look at this book online, either one of them, and we appreciate him taking time. He lives in Houston, Texas, to be with us tonight. And Richard, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so
Steve,
much.
Real pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes.